Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. With lecture 19, you are meeting me once again with the course of Business English. In today's lecture, we are going to restart where we paused our discussion regarding report writing, because in between we brought in our discussion based on research and research process, and we know that research process, proposal and report writing, they are basically parts of the same process. So we will resume our discussion on report writing, and we will discuss types of report writings, preliminary reports where we will discuss problems and need analysis, comparison reports, recommendation and feasibility reports, and audience for these reports, organizations and formattings of these reports, how to structure and discussion about structuring, and then we also talk about some types of proposals like white papers and marketing plans and usability reports. And then we will also discuss one checklist regarding the effective reports. Before that I start with the types of report, I would like to refresh your understanding what we discussed about reports, the nature of this document, and the anatomy and all the things that are important to set your basis to move on with to build up your knowledge on that. So a business report is an orderly and objective communication of factual information that serves some business purpose. And how it is orderly, how it is objective, and how it is factual and informative, these are the four basic things that we discussed in our previous two lectures where we talked about research process. So it has to be organized, it has to be objective, we can validate it, we can verify it, and we can present it to authenticate our knowledge. It has to be based on facts, it has to be unbiased and informative, whether you are going to have it as informative or you're going to have it as persuasive, or both together, it's the writer's decision. So we discussed all these aspects in detail in our two previous lectures. Alright, now reports are categorized by functions: informational reports and analytical reports. These are two categories of reports, and they're also categorized by time, like progress reports, periodic reports, and special reports. The third category of the reports is based on the form of the report, that is memo report, letter report, or manuscript report, that we have already talked in quite length. All right, now I am going to show you structures of some formal situation-based reports and some informal situation-based reports, and both of these situations basically affect the nature of the problem and as definitely report document as well. If a situation is very formal and very complex, your document will have several sections inside, and with the passage of time, if you go down and see if it's an informal report and it's a simple problem, then definitely your report format will change into the very simple one, and you may have a memo report. So starting from the simple and informal situations, you can see on the screen we have a memo report like we discussed in the previous section, that was lecture 18. In lecture 18, I gave you one example of one complete discussion based on a memo report. And if it goes on and the situation gets a little more complex, it will become letter report. And then you see for the proper report, you have a title page and 3-4 pages of report. If it gets very formal, you get title page, and then you have another page of summary and transmittal letter, and then you go on with a detailed report. And slowly and gradually, it becomes larger, thicker, and longer. Okay, so this is the skeleton of different types of situations and the nature of problem that tells you what kind of report you are going to produce. Now, once again, let's get into report writing process. Before that, we discuss our types of report. We need to plan the project, that is proposal. We need to design the research tool, that is again part of proposal. We need to design what are the collection and analysis tools, and we need to go through them during our research process. We organize all the information, and then we sit down to write the report. Sometimes, I've already discussed and brought into your knowledge, that we are writing drafts of report while we are collecting data and while we are analyzing data, so to keep a record of each and everything. However, report cannot be finalized until we have the findings and conclusions there in front of us. And so the last version that we can do once we are done with all the steps and procedures can be the final draft of our writing. And then final draft has to go through rigorous editing and proofreading, so the final product is flawless. The writing process, I will try to bring in your attention a flow chart of the writing process that you can see on the screen. The flow chart has 4 basic stages, and however what is to be taken care of, and I want you to take notice of this fact that all these 4 phases are two-way correspondence between stages. You can see that you can always move to phase 2, phase 3, however there is always a possibility to go back again, modify something, revise something, revisit something, and move on to the same thing again. So it's a kind of circular process of writing your report, and then this flexibility of having drafts of writing definitely makes it very easy for the writer to revisit one thing again and again unless he or she is satisfied. So if we cut them into phases, the phase 1 is about preparation. So in preparation you identify and define the problem and analyze the audience, and in phase 2 you determine the methodology and collect the information. In phase 3, that is of analysis, you organize and evaluate the information, and you draw conclusions and make recommendations. However, as far as the phase 4 is concerned, you write your draft, and that is almost the second last draft or the semi-final draft. That is when you revise it and when you edit it and you package your report. Basically, you are done with your final draft. So what you need to be careful about, that you have to be evaluative in nature, being a researcher and being a reporter of your research. You need to evaluate your work at each step and at each stage, and don't forget that you can always go back, revise and modify to bring in the quality that you look forward to. So after this quick refresher, I hope we are ready to start with our types of report, and we can see how many types we can talk about today. So this section of the talk is going to describe the popular report types listed above and that we have already talked about, and will point to more detailed description. It is a nuts and bolts discussion regarding report writing. So this will make sense in an immediately accessible context. Imagine that you want to ask a close relative who gives you money freely for money to support your business. So your approach would be very different than if you were to ask a venture capitalist for that same money. Well, while you might write a proposal in each instance, these two proposals will not be similar in length, tone, support for the argument, financial statements, and so on, because your audience is different. One is your relative or friend, and other is your venture capitalist. We already know what venture capitalist. We discussed this term in one of our audio listings. All right. When adjusting the report to your purpose, you should consider who will read the report, why, in what detail, with what prejudice, with what knowledge, and to make what decision. So whatever type of decision do you want your reader to make, your report will make a case for that. So keeping your audience needs in mind will help you decide the level of formality in structure and tone of your report, the length of the report, what kinds of data to include, tables, figures, general graphs or pictures, or maybe a video clip, how much to explain. Definitely we cannot add video clip into our hard copy or the soft copy of the, but we can always make attachments, and we can provide a CD along with that. How much to explain, what kind of explanation is required, what positions to defend my point of view, and the visual sophistication required for my report. Well, preliminary reports where you are talking about problems or need analysis, a problem or need analysis report, a very preliminary piece of writing is that examines a particular issue that the client faces. A problem or needs analysis is particularly appropriate when the need or problem is complex or ill-defined. Now, perhaps the client is not convinced of the need for change, or personnel in the client organization have different views about the issue, which is often the case. However, a problem or needs analysis names the problem that you think should be addressed and provides analysis that supports your position. Such analyses are especially appropriate to a problem-solving paradigm. So, professional communication includes a variety of reports common to business and industry, and we are going to discuss many of them briefly and then point to further discussion and models available elsewhere in the professional writing. They can be online, or they can be we can get them from different resources. We have argued that you can identify reports by differences in audience and purpose. Actually, there are even more factors to include. Every discussion of report format is complicated by the fact that reports within the same classification may vary in length, complexity of audience, formality, purpose and functions inside or outside the organization. And this section describes the popular report types listed above and points to more detailed descriptions. It is a nuts and bolts discussion. We also direct your attention to writing reports in principles. That section addresses writing reports more generally, and I may include this talk of writing process into this section, or I may need to postpone it for the next lecture. So, to comfortably grasp the section of report types, you need to embrace report truth number 1, that is, reports may be classified similarly and still function and even appear very differently in two different situations. And this will make sense in an immediately accessible context. Imagine that you want to ask a close relative who gives you money freely, or for money to support your business. Well, your approach would be very different than if you were to ask a venture capitalist for that same money. While you might write a proposal in each instance, these two proposals will not be similar in length, in tone, in supportive evidences for the argument, financial statements, so on and so forth. So when adjusting the report to your purpose, you should consider who will read the report, why, in what detail, with what prejudice, with what knowledge, and to make what type of decision. Keeping your audience needs in mind will help you decide the level of formality and the structure and tone you are going to have, the length of the report, what kind of data you are going to include, how much you need to explain, how much detail you need to explain it, what positions you will take to defend your argument, and what kind of graphics and pictures and that would suit and match the need of your audience. Project plans. Here's an old maxim about projects. A project can be done fast, cheap, and well, but you only get 2 out of 3, not all 3 together. A project plan may be part of a proposal, or it may be a report of its own. The purpose of a project plan is to conceptualize, organize, and plan a project, usually with 2 audiences in mind. The project participants themselves, for whom such a report acts as a guide, will be contracted to complete tasks at specific times. So, supervisors or others in the organization whom the report seeks to persuade and inform allot support and resources for the project. So, principally, the project plan should define the shape and scope of the project, what will be produced, for whom it is intended, what is the scope of treatment. A good plan also anticipates possible problems or obstacles. A plan is persuasive in trying to secure the reader's approval, but it should also be realistic and honest in its assessment about what can be done within a particular time frame. That is very important that you take care of that. And a project plan typically includes an overview, which most importantly includes a statement of purpose, a description of the client and their needs, a list of deliverables, all the documents or products to be created, and a detailed schedule for a project, a timeline, maybe often in Gantt or per chart form, and a budget detail list, a list of personnel together with an assignment of their duties, personnel, people, whosoever assistant you are going to use for your study, and responsibilities they bear to the project. And perhaps a discussion of their qualification as well, how they are suitable as candidates, and a methodology or procedure to be followed. That is a proper research plan. The project plan needs to convince management that a project is well organized and feasible, and that the participants listed are all necessary in order for the project to be successful. So this is all that we had to discuss about the project plan particulars. So this was these were the things that we need to take care of whenever we are compiling and producing project plans and proposals. Now let's see what we can do when we are doing comparison reports. Well, a comparison report examines two or more options and performs a relative advantages analysis to determine which option would best serve the client. Use a comparative format when there are several serious alternatives that should be considered. So these are called comparison reports. Comparison reports are similar to recommendation reports and feasibility reports in their approach, that is establishing criteria for a good option and evaluating possible options, and sometimes the reports are identical except in name. Well, but in some technical communication situations, the comparison report only includes analysis and does not recommend a course of action. If it does not recommend on an action, then the comparison report takes on some of the function of a white paper or backgrounder report. Now, what is this feasibility report about? Well, a feasibility report may respond to a single question or recommend a specific option or action. It may also apply several criteria to that option and make a judgment as to whether it would be in the client's best interest to implement the option. Simple thumbs up or thumbs down situation. We can use a feasibility format when the client has one favored alternative or plan of action and is trying to determine the effects of that one course of action. So feasibility in this context refers both to technical feasibility in the limited sense, can this be done, will this action solve the problem, as well as to a wider sense of feasibility that focuses on the desirability of a certain course of action. Should this be done? Is it reasonable to do this? Will the benefits of doing this outweigh the ill effects? Is this in the best interest of the company? So recommendations and feasibility reports, as we discussed, that both are almost the same. Both recommendation reports and feasibility reports make statements about what action should be taken to solve a problem, resolve a dilemma, or undertake a course of action. And the main distinction between the two reports, however, is dependent on their positioning in a company's decision and decision-making process. A recommendation report is written when several courses of action seem possible, while a feasibility report is done after a tentative decision has been reached. Thus, when we say that a decision needs to be made about a product or course of action, the recommendation report suggests criteria for a good decision from among a number of alternatives. The feasibility report, on the other hand, suggests criteria to determine whether a particular course of action is reasonable and appropriate. Now, take the actions of a regional commission searching for country park sites as an example. Early on in the commission's work, the group will entertain a number of alternatives for park sites. They will develop criteria, for example, number of residents, distance from other parks, cost of land, safety, national attractions, availability, and so on, and search for sites that meet those criteria. It is during this period that the Commission may entertain a recommendation report that evaluates potential sites according to the Commission's criteria. Later, when the Commission settles on a tentative site, it will usually employ a consultant to develop a feasibility report that tests the suitability of the one favored site for park development. Now, this feasibility report will still reach a recommendation to proceed with action or to halt some kind of action. To reach that recommendation, it will consider very carefully the more technical criteria and focus on any problem criteria. Now, it will also take a wider view of the development as a way to anticipate any roadblock or any problem that can come up. The feasibility study will usually look at road improvements need, cost of land and land improvements, utility state, easements, groundwater toxicity, suitability of site for public recreational needs, and so on, or maybe some utility of some usage of some product. The feasibility report written for this situation will be a formal report, and if done by a consultant, it will include a presentation at a public meeting. And this point makes me introduce you to another very important aspect of our business English course, is the presentation skills. We will spending considerable time on this part of the course. So coming back to the audience for these reports, in the ideal reporting situation, the audience for these reports are decision makers who will read them, who will read the reports because they consider solutions to organizational problems. So in this ideal readers world, target readers will appear the report types quite differently. They will approach it quite differently and they will listen to it quite differently. So these are your target audience. So recommendation reports are written before a decision is reached and made, and thus it may seem the writer has more input into decision making. So for decision making reports, you have to be very persuasive because you are directing towards a decision or a couple of decisions. Feasibility studies, by contrast, seem often written to assure decision makers that their initial decisions are workable and sound. But these ideal reader situations do not often reflect realistic reporting situations. First of all, the government and most professional organizations use the term recommendation as an advocacy term. Now, recommendation reports are written to advocate a particular change in public policy, and they seldom address the range of alternatives that textbooks prescribe, nor do they maintain an analytical distance from the activity of recommendation. Instead, these advocacy reports focus on building rationales for their acceptance. Second, consultants and sales forces often develop recommendation and feasibility reports that openly advocate solutions that are most advantageous to their interest. We expect a consultant to suggest extra work, but he or she may also recommend a solution that does not seem that costly, although it will inevitably be very profitable to him or her personally. Now, because of the varied agendas forwarded in recommendation and feasibility reports, decision makers are often skeptical of recommendations that are not well substantiated by research. So if you are writing a recommendation report, be always very clear and very convincing about the substantiative material that you are providing. You need to have good and effective supportive evidence to substantiate your recommendations whatsoever you are making, because if your recommendation report or feasibility report is not convincing, very likely that you are not able to convince the reader, and if you have been unable to convince the reader, then this will be a failure of your message that has been communicated. As the stakes rise, so too should the backing provided for these important readers who are likely to read these with caution. One can be sure, however, that they will read with care, because both recommendation and feasibility reports address organizational problems. Now, with this we come to the organization and formatting of these reports. A general plan for recommendation and feasibility reports suggests that they are similar in organization. As is true of most reports, both begin with an introduction that identifies the organizational problem, tells the scope of the report and how it will function. Most then state the recommendations for action, though some organizations will vary that pattern by stating recommendations after each section or at the end of that. The body of the report starts similarly, as they both need to discuss the criteria for solutions and the background that makes these criteria appropriate to be said here. But usually have a grid that summarizes the ratings, alternatives received on each criteria. Then the reports diverge a bit, as the goal of the recommendation report is to present all the responsible alternatives for action and to examine their fit with the criteria, while the feasibility study is more focused on examining the one solution it addresses in detail. Now, both report types offer a conclusion and then supporting references and data. How much supporting documentation they offer depends on the scope of the decision. For instance, if the reporting situation handles recommendations for purchasing office equipment, the report will likely to be written as a memo and the supporting data will be brief. However, if the report addresses site selection for a low-income housing project, the report will likely to be organized as a formal report and include extensive supporting documentation. So, the format of a recommendation report would look something like this. You have an introduction section, you have discussion of alternative section, you have conclusions and recommendation sections. Now, each section is then further divided into subsections. Look at the introduction section that talks about the organization of problem, and this report's scope and approach, and what are going to be the recommendations. And then discussion of the alternative section will involve the background of the problem, criteria used for evaluation, how did you evaluate all these things, and application of criteria to each of the alternatives. So you are providing a comparison and rationale for recommendations forwarded. And then the conclusion recommendation section will provide references and supporting documents. Please keep in mind that whenever you are making the categories, or whenever you are sectioning your report, you may find some data overlapping and some data being repeated. However, the repetition will not be same in kind, but you may need to bring in references again and again to refer to something else or to substantiate something else. So the minor overlapping has to be there because it develops the link, but extensive overlapping that is caused by the extensive repetition of the same language or the same text or the same kind of information may cause you results that you do not desire to have, or that are unexpected, or that may cause your project a failure. So always be very clear about if you're repeating something, try to paraphrase it, try to rearrange the organization of that text, and then bring in the logic. Why are you? Think twice. Why are you repeating this information? Is it indispensable in the situation, or you can do it some other way possible? So we talked about the formatting and organization issues. Now structuring the discussion. That is very important, because if your discussion is not appropriately structured, the outcomes may not likely be the one you are expecting. An important organizational decision for recommendation report or feasibility report is how to organize the discussion of alternatives. Or maybe in any kind of report where you are providing two kinds of arguments, there are counter arguments. How do you provide the counter arguments in order to bring the one that you want your readers to pay attention to in the limelight? So should you organize by alternatives or by criteria? Actually, the organization of the discussion should fit its solution or situation. Normally, to reach a good decision, one considers a number of alternatives by comparing their performance using certain criteria. Stating recommendation, how do you state them? Another important consideration in both recommendation and feasibility reports is the stating of recommendation action. How do you pose your recommendations so that they are actionable, respectful of the decision makers, and appropriate for the organization? What I suggest to you is state the content of your recommendation in a sentence, then make or in a section, or make the organization the agent of the action you recommend. Make the verb an action, use action verbs. We need to consider nominalization, the strategy of nominalization in writing style for this particular thing. Include any qualifications in the sentence. And the problematic aspects to deal with are: the report recommends the first alternative. You should buy cars rather than lease them. The first alternative is better than the second one at this time. So provide sentence structures that would help you place your idea, the preference first than the second one. Now, this report recommends that the area commission make the Provincetown High sites its first priority for park development because of its historic character and reasonable price land. So the topic that we started our discussion with, which areas to recommend. For example, some companies should buy new autos for its fleet rather than lease them because of the new IRS deprecations regulations. So while an all digital film exchange is a goal, current cost makes it too expensive for the Arena League, and thus we recommend that beta format be used in League Film Exchange. So these are three different versions of providing your recommendations and stating how do you state your recommendations, what kind of structure, language structure do you use to state your recommendations. Now, some other examples, you can find many examples of recommendations and feasibility reports on the web. Some of the reports developed by governmental agencies can be found at the given addresses. Census Bureau, research reports from the different channels, and Federal Trade Commission also provides some wonderful samples of feasibility and consideration reports. And some more examples can be found on the links given on the screen, and these links will provide you the information about the formatting for the web or for the general public, and they will also tell you about recommendation reports, how they are intended to promote policies. So these are some international standard formats and samples that you can use to have your own version of report that can be a localized version, or that can be a solicited version that you want to produce. And with this, we are almost at the end of our today's talk on the subject matter that made you connect your previous three lectures with this lecture, having an idea of what is report writing, how do we do report writing, why do we do report writing, what is the anatomy of report writing, how many parts are there, how do we organize it, what process we go through, what is the relation between the process, proposal and report writing and research, of course. So, and also we had a discussion of some types of report, and the next lecture is going to be a series of the same talk, where we are going to discuss some more types of reports to enable you understand as many as possible in Business English course. So now it's time to move on to our listening activity and language expansion exercise. So, but before we move on, I would like to, just refresh what we talked about recommendation reports. Is that recommendation reports, as the name suggests, or feasibility reports, advise on what specific action should be taken by an organization, and they are composed at the end of a process of inquiry and notify the reader or the decision makers that a certain course of action should be followed or should be taken. The argument of recommendation report can be developed in numerous ways, and we discussed most of the possible ways that we can use to state our recommendations. All right, it's time to move on with your listening activity and language expansion exercise. And this, in today's lecture, what we are going to talk about, project presentation, idea of project presentation, and today's listening activity can be a little longer than usual, so you can get as much as possible and what we have designed for you for today's talk. All right, so let's start with our listening activity. You can see a few questions on the screen, and today's listening activity will provide you opportunity to answer these questions. And again, I repeat, today's activity is going to be about presentations.
Hello and welcome back to Business English Pod. My name's Edwin, and I'll be your host for today's lesson on product presentations. Okay, so imagine your company has just launched a brand new product, or a new and improved version of an existing one. Now it's time to get the word out and show the world what the new product is all about. And how do we do that? Well, nothing beats a great product presentation. You can go to the customer directly and show off the item, talk about its features, and demonstrate how it works. So, how can we make sure our product presentations are effective? How can we talk to our customers in ways they understand? Fortunately, there are several key techniques you can learn to deliver a great product presentation. In this lesson, we'll cover many of these techniques, including presenting the current situation, relating features to audience needs, and giving an overview of features. We'll also look at how to call attention to something on screen and deal with technical issues, which can mess up any well-planned presentation. In the dialogue, we'll hear Jenny, who's at a trade conference representing her company, ProBooks. They've just launched a new upgrade called ProBooks Fusion, and Jenny's explaining what it's all about to an audience of existing customers. As you listen, try to answer the following questions. 1. What is the key concept behind the most recent ProBooks upgrade? 2. What feature of the software does Jenny want to demonstrate? 3. What is Jenny's solution to the technical problem?
So now that we know who's who, let's get the ball rolling. So, we've had some great success with ProBooks, and we're happy to hear from customers like you that it really gets the job done and helps you make good business decisions. Now that's great, but we understand that software doesn't work in isolation. And the big push for us now is to make ProBooks integrate better with other software. Maybe I can get a quick show of hands. How many people here think that sounds like a good idea? Uh-huh. Yeah, I could see from all the hands and nodding heads that a lot of you do think it's a good idea. And a lot of the feedback we get is around this idea of integration. So this is what we're shooting for with the ProBooks Fusion upgrade. Now, when I say integration, what exactly do I mean? Well, when you sit down with the new update, you'll notice a few big changes. First, you'll see all the tools you need right up front. Invoicing, banking, payroll, you name it, it's all there. And all of this is going to mesh really well with your reports. I'm talking about a bunch of new ways to present all that data you need to run your business. Sound good so far?
Sounds great. And if I could just ask, are tax tables included?
Yes, for sure. Didn't mention that one, but it's definitely there. And I'll be sure to demo that once I go over some of the report features. All right, so let's get into it. Now, I want to actually show you some of the changes we've made. So let me just direct your attention to the screen over here to my right. Okay, I'm going to pull up the main dashboard here. Notice that we've changed the look and feel a bit and given a lot more space to the overall layout. Less crowded. Now let me just go into Reports tab over here, and what you'll see is a list of basic reports. You're probably familiar with most of these. But over here you'll see Advanced Reports. So let's just click that here and... Whoa, looks like we've lost our projector here. Okay, no problem, folks. Let's just, oh, okay. Let's just plug into the monitor, and we'll do it by screencast. Okay, so can everyone see okay? Great. Now let's get back to the reports page here, and I'll show you some of these new features.
Now, let's go through the dialogue again and look at the techniques Jenny uses in her presentation.
So now that we know who's who, let's get the ball rolling. So, we've had some great success with ProBooks, and we're happy to hear from customers like you that it really gets the job done and helps you make good business decisions.
After people have introduced themselves, Jenny wants to get the ball rolling, or start the presentation. And the first thing Jenny mentions is ProBooks' success and some of the feedback from customers who say that the software gets the job done. This is another way of saying that it is effective. As we can hear, before Jenny discusses the changes in the new software upgrade, she wants to present the current situation. This helps to give the presentation a positive feeling from the start and show how the new product is part of the company's development. Presenting the current situation is a great way to start a product presentation. So let's practice some more examples of this technique.
Our mobile network is recognized as one of the most reliable around.
We've shown we can offer great products at competitive prices.
Rock Solid Auto Parts now provides over 10,000 products backed by excellent customer service.
Our customers tell us that we're tops in design and functionality.
Okay, let's listen as Jenny begins to explain the changes to the product.
Now that's great, but we understand that software doesn't work in isolation. And the big push for us now is to make ProBooks integrate better with other software. Maybe I can get a quick show of hands. How many people here think that sounds like a good idea?
At this point, Jenny introduces the major theme or focus of the changes, which is to help ProBooks integrate better with other software. Integrate means to combine with or work with. We'll hear this word in its noun form, integration, throughout Jenny's presentation. Also, notice that she engages the audience by asking for a show of hands. In other words, she wants people to raise their hands if they like the idea of integration. So, how does the audience respond?
Yeah, I could see from all the hands and nodding heads that a lot of you do think it's a good idea. And a lot of the feedback we get is around this idea of integration. So this is what we're shooting for with the ProBooks Fusion upgrade.
Jenny mentions the raised hands and the nodding heads, which is a sign of agreement. The audience is responding positively to this idea of integration. In fact, the company heard directly from customers that this integration was necessary, so that's what they were shooting for, or aiming for, with the new upgrade. In this way, Jenny is showing the audience that the features of the product are related to their needs. Of course, this will help them see the value of the upgrade. How else can we relate features to audience needs? Let's run through a few more examples.
These smaller, lighter devices will help those of you looking for portable solutions.
For busy professionals, we have a great scheduling function.
Our customers need mobile access to information, so we've moved your data to the cloud.
For those who need hands-free control, we've got a voice-activated system.
Jenny has presented the overall focus of the new product, and now she can talk more specifically about its features.
Now, when I say integration, what exactly do I mean? Well, when you sit down with the new update, you'll notice a few big changes. First, you'll see all the tools you need right up front. Invoicing, banking, payroll, you name it, it's all there. And all of this is going to mesh really well with your reports. I'm talking about a bunch of new ways to present all that data you need to run your business.
You can hear that Jenny sets her explanation up with a question about what integration means. This is a useful trick. Before you explain something, you can ask the question you're about to answer. Next, Jenny mentions a few big changes before beginning to list them individually, starting with first. She is giving an overview of features, including new tools and how they mesh really well with reports. Mesh is another word for integrate or combine. Also, notice how Jenny continues to relate these features back to the audience's needs, mentioning the data you need to run your business. Let's try some more useful ways of giving an overview of features or changes.
We've taken our popular headphones and added greater comfort and better noise reduction.
The new Wakeboat has touch-screen controls, adjustable seats, and a tower cam.
These portable air conditioners have allergy reduction filters and improved design.
With the latest Project Pro software, you'll get video conferencing and advanced issue tracking.
Now, once again, Jenny wants to check in with her audience.
Sound good so far?
Sounds great. And if I could just ask, are tax tables included?
Yes, for sure. Didn't mention that one, but it's definitely there. And I'll be sure to demo that once I go over some of the report features.
It's a good idea, as Jenny shows us, to make sure your audience is following along with simple questions like, "Sound good so far?" And it's a good thing she did, because somebody in the audience was wondering about tax tables. Jenny has the chance to assure him that tax tables are included in the new upgrade and promise to demo or demonstrate that feature at a later time. Now, let's listen as Jenny begins an actual demonstration.
All right, so let's get into it. Now, I want to actually show you some of the changes we've made. So let me just direct your attention to the screen over here to my right.
Jenny wants to get into it or explore things more deeply, so she opens the software for everyone to see on a large screen. But we can't just start showing something without actually calling attention to it, which Jenny does by saying, "Let me just direct your attention to the screen." When you direct someone's attention, you are asking them to look specifically at something. Product presentations often include PowerPoint slides and other visuals. So let's look at some other great ways to call people's attention to something on screen.
Have a look at the monitor here, and I'll show you how this all works.
Notice right at the top of the page there's a new menu for customization options.
Now, over here on the right, you can see a full list of service providers.
Okay, let me just put up a diagram that shows how the climate control system works.
Now listen as Jenny continues with her on-screen demonstration of the software.
Okay, I'm going to pull up the main dashboard here. Notice that we've changed the look and feel a bit and given a lot more space to the overall layout. Less crowded.
As Jenny pulls up or opens different parts of the program, she talks about what people are seeing. At first, she notes that the look and feel, or basic design, is different. In this way, she's helping customers become familiar with the new product.
Now, let me just go into Reports tab over here, and what you'll see is a list of basic reports. You're probably familiar with most of these. But over here, you'll see Advanced Reports. So let's just click that here, and whoa, looks like we've lost our projector here.
Instead of just clicking around the program while people wonder what's going on, Jenny makes sure she tells people what she's doing and what they should look at. She's basically narrating her actions during the demonstration, but suddenly there's a problem with the projector, which is the equipment that shows what she's doing on the screen. Technical problems probably won't come as a surprise to anyone who's done any kind of presentation, so it's important we learn to deal with them well. Let's hear how Jenny does this.
Okay, no problem, folks. Let's just, okay. Let's just plug into the monitor, and we'll do it by screencast.
Right away, Jenny reassures the audience, saying no problem, folks. Then instead of just trying to solve the problem quietly while everyone waits, she continues her commentary, telling the audience how she's solving the problem. This helps her maintain their attention. Let's practice a few more ways of dealing with those frustrating technical problems during a presentation.
Oops, probably just a battery issue. Let me just plug this in here.
Alright, so I hope that you would have understood the listening, the audio activity today, and you would be able to answer these questions. Well, once you have formed your answers, let me explain these answers to you so you can match and see if you could get this right. The very first question that talks about what is the key concept behind the most recent ProBook upgrade is that idea of integration, that is bringing changes and experimenting with new features and eventually getting into good business decisions. The second question talks about what features of the software does Jenny want to demonstrate, and these are report features that is intended. Now, what is Jenny's solution to the technical problem? Well, she tries to plug into the monitor directly, but while she's doing that, and the audio narrates in detail, she's narrating all the time to tell how do you come up with technological problems at the spur of the moment and how do you solve it. Well, that was all for today's listening activity, and that was all for today's lecture too. And what we did in today's lecture, if we summarize it quickly, we talked about report writing, and we tried to, after having our refresher, we tried to talk about different types of report writing, precisely the recommendation and feasibility reports, the structure and the formatting and the organization issues that we deal with. And we also talked about some kind of structuring and discussion issues, where how do we state our idea and how do we put forward some recommendations to bring them into limelight. And I shared some examples, websites with you, so you can go and find out the international and national standard templates and standard reports as your role model. This was all for today's talk. I'll catch you in the next lecture, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.